those are the only things I can tell you, that it's ancient, it's magnetic, it's a technology, and someone's know a lot about it.
And that's the number one thing, that we're overly toxic. So you got to detox. When even organic food is still toxic, you need to have time without the food.
Thank you, everybody, for joining again, supporting human created content. Yeah, because I was talking to somebody too, was very convinced that an EMP is going to be used on the U.S. at some point, not sure when, but I was like, all right, well, there has to be a major solar flare, and then they can ride on top of that. They can, so there's already, I've seen multiple stories talking about get ready for power outages as this EMP and the sun ticks off, that, there's going to be power outages here or there. But imagine if you were waiting for the next large CME to come and you knew it was going to be an X class plus flare. You just simply need to wait like a spider does. And when the next CME comes pounding in, if that's the opportune time, you throw that EMP on top, and it was the sun. It wasn't any military intervention. It was the sun. So the same exact thing, if you're talking about coming through the orbital pattern here as the Earth swings around, how many months from now will that be? 3 months as we come back to where Atlas was, as it passes previously? Mm-hmm. Are they talking some sort of ion trail that will be left and then come down to Earth, and we'll all get radiated, we'll all get upgraded?
Yeah, that's the thing. Again, it's upgrades that are happening, and people can feel it. Like when we talk to all the people that we talk to on a regular basis, obviously they're people that have a spiritual practice for the most part, or are interested in it. They're all noticing big changes in how everything feels, time, space, the frequencies. Yesterday we were talking with a lady doing energy work, and she was feeling the energy work from head to toe, and it was tickling her fancy that she could actually feel it so strong. But there's changes in our frequencies.
She had a really bad migraine, and
it went away.
Mike got rid of it. So she was just so happy. He uses me as a medium. So since she can't be here, he has his hands on my head, and it took about 10 minutes, and that migraine was gone. And she does not get to experience that. So I think our energetic abilities are coming up, but that can bring a lot of chaos too, just like the Earth,
Unless it's not going to be used any longer, and that's part of the plan. Like, why would you repair something that's not going to be used?
Right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, something that's going to get destroyed. And, I've thought about that a lot. And I do think that people here in the U.S., if you're in a small town, you're probably going to be able to get through whatever they have planned for us easier, of course, than you would be in a bigger city. That's why the cities have always scared me. How is that going to be sustainable when people really get hungry? They change. Mm-hmm. They change.
So behaving differently, people are going to start stealing food, and especially out in the countryside. It's going to be the cities. It's going to be everywhere. But then where does this letter of the law start to, draw that line between?
We're all being manipulated. That's the thing. We're all being manipulated. We have to stop, thinking of things in a tribal sense, even though probably what's going to happen, people will branch off into smaller tribes. You're going to, start coming together with other like-minded people because, you don't want to eat stuff that has this in it or that's in it. And you don't want to, go along with certain policies and procedures. So, I think like Florida, they're really truly talking about getting rid of, they already don't have income tax, but, getting rid of the property tax there too. I think there'll be more freer, safer zones. And I think that's the way it's going to deteriorate. There'll be other areas that become much more Fourth Reich-ish as time goes on.
As we wrap up 2025, it's a good time to slow down and reflect on the year. If there's one thing we all learned, it's that uncertainty isn't temporary. It's the world we live in now. Waiting for things to go back to normal isn't a plan. It's a gamble. For over a decade, my friends at Noble Gold Investments have helped Americans protect themselves and the people they love by diversifying their wealth in gold and silver. No one knows what 2026 will bring, but one thing's for sure. In an uncertain world, real wealth isn't digital, it's physical, it's lasting, it's yours. So when you're sitting around the table this holiday season, surrounded by family, remember the best gift you can give isn't under the tree, it's peace of mind. So before the year ends, take one smart step toward a safer future. Visit 2030gold.com and get your free wealth protection kit today. That's 2030gold.com. And this holiday season, if you open a qualified account with noblegoldinvestments.com, they're going to send you 10 of these 1-ounce silver rounds. Holiday season's greetings. And on the back, we have the Happy Snowman, which melts at 32 degrees Fahrenheit. Silver, 1,763 degrees. It's metals. Your stockings are waiting for these. Head to 2030gold.com. Click on that link in the description box below. Cindy, energetically, Taiwan, like somebody had asked me, because I live there part of the year. Aren't you afraid to go to Taiwan? I was like, all right, all the major chip manufacturing is there on the planet right now. So if Taiwan were to get invaded and those factories were to be destroyed or disrupted, even just an economic invasion and a shutdown and a blockade, the entire world's movement forward to these 2030 agenda goals of trying to get track and trace and, autonomous robots and drones and everything that needs to be thousands, millions more cameras and all this AI, it all runs on those chips and is relying on those chips being manufactured at like en masse, not disrupted in any way, shape, or form, triple production and then push it out. So they're like, aren't you worried about Taiwan? I'm like, no, because the plans that are at least put forward for the next 5 years, 7 years are going to require steady, uninterrupted source of these chips. So for that source to get interrupted, that would totally derail all of the plans that are at least planned moving forward here on these steps that are integrated from year to year. I just can't see that happening. Like they would be the ones that would be slicing their own toes off by doing this, so, energetically, a lot of people are fearful of Taiwan, China's going to invade, but I mean, what are you feeling on that there as a flashpoint for the planet?
I think you really need to go within it, just like you did, and look at the situation and weigh everything for yourself. What is going to work for you? We do have a very strong spiritual practice, because when it's all said and done, you are going to rely on yourself. You're going to have to rely on that resiliency wherever you're at. That spiritual practice is always going to be there. It's not going to be taken away from you. And if you have it, you're going to be led the right way. You're going to be led in the right direction. So it's going to be all over the board for people. But if you have that grounding, you're going to make the right decision.
I would be more concerned with quakes and, tsunami potential, that type of thing.
Some people are in California. They might say, well, I'm okay with a quake. I'm okay with a tsunami because I'm happy where I'm at. I don't want to go anywhere due to X, Y, and Z. So it's up to the individual person, but you do have to calculate things exactly the way you did. So.
Yeah, the quakes, they do give you a strange feeling after being in, I've been up to like some 5.9s, not quite 6, and they're disturbing to your physiology and your psyche for a few days afterward, especially like if you're in the middle of the night and it hits and you wake up and everything's shaking. And in Taiwan, it's not really you get a couple jarring ones that go, do, 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 do. That's not really the type you get. You get that more like undulating sea wave type where you're like, whoa, whoa. And that's why the buildings start swaying versus where they just shake, and your physical centering is off after quakes for a minute.
Yeah.
If they're larger, like a couple small ones, you'll brush past that.
Yeah.
But a large one will definitely, you're off for a few days. And if there's another subsequent couple of those on top as aftershocks, you're like, oh, okay, let's, you laughed when I said that. You must have.
Yeah, it can rattle the cage. I laughed because I shouldn't laugh, but we do have people call us after rather large quakes, trying to regain their center, because it does throw them. Other people, maybe they are able to stay in the room and sleep it off, but our frequency is everything. So it's really important to build that energy body. The stronger that is, the less you're going to be affected.
Yeah, you do have a termination point of the plates right there, right before Taipei. So that would be my primary thing. I think, like you said, if China does want to take over Taiwan, they don't want to blast it to bits. They just want to take it right over and keep it producing what it's producing. But yeah, the quakes, because I do think there's going to be major earth changes. Really, what we have going so far, a lot of it's been technology induced and maybe a little weather warfare. Um, you know, we have one of our family members. He's been supporting us for years. He's pretty high up in government, and you know, he was just making note. You got to be aware of, again, where what places, you know, are more tenuous than others, and then our guides too. When I was tempted to go back to live along the coastline, they were kind of like, you know, go inland a little bit. Don't be right on the coast. Just because there's so much potential, and like what we were talking about before, with those series of 3.9 earthquakes. That they ended up saying it was ship hull testing for the Navy's newest battleship. You know, there is the potential that Russia's come right out and said, you know, they have tsunami bombs, and if, you know, the UK does certain things, they'll just, you know, wash over the UK if they go too far. So I mean, that is a real possibility as well. You know, there's challenges anywhere you go, but you have to be somewhere that feels good to you, because you never know. Maybe, you know, your higher self wanted to put you in the middle of the chaos so you could help out people that are trying to survive after some sort of, you know, disaster.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. I'm understanding our planetary orbit when it comes around. The residual from several of these comets that have come through on sort of the same trajectory are all lining up, right? And it's interesting. We've had 3 of them come through that same kind of center point where our planet's going to go through here in about 3 months. So, you know, energetically, could there be a resonance field left over that we can pass through? Is this thing laying down a rope of resonance that we are absolutely going to go through, and that residual? I don't know how much on the debris field will be there, but for sure on the energetics,
Mm-hmm.
you would know better than me. I'm just, because I understand in plasma and light, there's energy and there's information contained within that. So, you know, can something be left over on purpose so we absolutely pass through that? And that was the plan for the trajectory going around Mars, going through Jupiter, coming to, you know, the Earth and our orbits here. Like it the way it went through, what's that, 4 or 5 planets are going to actually pass through where this thing had transited through our skies. That's a solar system wide energetic or knowledge transference, I think.
Yeah, you know, it definitely lays the groundwork for questions if there's any sort of strange occurrences that happen when we go through that area, whether or not they were actually tied to it. But it definitely can get a lot of people to make the connection, and maybe that's, you know, an opportunity for some people with whatever, you know, their agenda may be. I think that what Cindy got was, and my initial impressions too, was not that Comet Atlas was um, something that was bad. That it was something that was trying to reset the natural way of things.
Bring us back to our blueprint, and sometimes that can look difficult. It can be painful, and that's what I've seen. So I can only speak to what I've been seeing, and that's folks going through awakenings and having disruptions in their lives to the point where they don't know what's going on. You know, everything around me is changing so fast. My head is on a swivel. I have this going on. I have 10 fires to put out. What's happening? I think that it is those comets. I think they've come to realign us. And when you go through an alignment, one thing that my shaman didn't tell me when I was initiated was about the alignment process. I had to walk through that blindfolded, and I didn't realize that, yeah, sometimes you have to lose everything to rebuild it the way it was intended.
Because in one of your videos, you were talking about the Kali Yuga ending April 8th, 2024. So it's really interesting that immediately, just within a year after that, there's another reset of something that was allowed to, or maybe always does, come through as these Yuga cycles shift, like the very next year after the proper shift, that, you know, there's something there to realign from the absolute immediate beginning with less than a year, and then we're talking a multi-thousand-year cycles, that within a year of that transition, that there's something there for the entire reset. So I'm wondering if these happen every time at these conjunctions, because Dwapara Yuga, once we snap out of that into the instant manifestation golden age time, is there another realignment of some interstellar object that'll come through literally 1 year after we would step out of the Dwapara Yuga thousands of years from now?
Mhm.
Just throwing it out there.
No, yeah, that's a great thought. Yeah, when you think about the bigger mechanisms in play to bring about the changes, because they are dramatic, and I don't think I had a clue as to how dramatic the shifts can be. But what Cindy has picked up from the guides, and myself too at times, is that it's really dramatic. I mean, life in a Kali Yuga is really different than life in a Bronze Age and then Silver and Gold Age. It's interesting too, because one of the things that changes is time itself and our perception of the passing of time. So, when you ask people now, doesn't it seem strange? Like time is changing, speeding up. Of course, we're all getting older all the time, right? Relatively speaking, while we're inside the time-space continuum. But there's something different than just the, passing of one more year. It feels just like the whole reality is a little bit more pliable and maybe a little bit more dreamlike.
It does. Have you noticed, everybody, your clocks are always jumping ahead or behind in time? Can you ever keep any of your clocks in house in stasis, where I understand batteries and maybe some charge in the wall might, cause something to, but when you turn around the next day and something's 10 minutes off and the next thing's, 7 minutes different, and one of them's perfectly the way it was, and every other clock in your house has changed time overnight. It's just really strange how that seems to be happening if you notice it and if you have multiple timekeeping devices around.
Mm-hmm. With the Bronze Age, moving into it, what I am picking up is that the truth is going to have to come out. So the pink fog that we're looking at, that's really going to get people looking and poking and prodding and needing to know the truth, because that's your health, that's your life, that's your everything. You have to look at that. And there's going to be a series of events that do force people to get their noses in there and get busy and figure out what's going on. And in that sense, we're going to be able to see more. We're going to know all the things that have been going on for so many years that we were blind to, and now we can see it, and now we know what's behind it. So in that sense, it's not going to be better, it's going to be difficult, but it will change because we want it to.
Maybe, but how many people are willing to focus their mind? That's the whole thing about this sabotage through confusion idea, is there's going to be so much change at such a great velocity, all just layered on top, that thought process is going to be, well, confusing in itself to even know which direction for humanity, or 100 million people to think in a certain direction, or 1 billion people to think in that direction. I mean, is there going to be somewhere where everything totally ceases, where some sort of large CME comes in and social media and media and communications go down on half the planet, and then those people have to think for themselves without any input from the outside world, and that's where that natural vibration will come back in, and everybody will plug back in, and they'll start to think in a certain direction on a more unanimous way? I mean, was that what it would take, is a complete destruction of all communication and electricity fields around us? Well, there's still satellites above. There's still nano dust everywhere laying around.
Mm-hmm.
But if there were such a large EMP to knock all the electronics out on a certain part of the planet, could that be the catalyst to get enough people? And what is that number? I don't know the number of how many people need to think a certain way or a certain idea or a certain direction to actually change the hologram into a different matrix that it's front facing for us.
Yeah, I think we have to step out of the mindset, like when we go to see our doctors, if you go, we're used to, give me a pill and I'll make it better, but I don't have to change anything in my own life. We have to change things in our lives. If you really want things to be different, you're the one who has to do it. Will some outside force come in and do it for us if we don't do what we're in alignment to do, yeah, it will, but I can't say when.
You know, it's like we joke that we're training for the apocalypse because
We are.
we've like upped our game tremendously with our practices. So, you know, we exercise like pretty much 7 days a week. And we do, you know, qigong, you know, and mind, body, breath practice. We watch what we eat. Right now, we've been doing OMAD, which is 1 meal a day, and then we have a shake, a smoothie, usually like around, you know, if we get up at 4 or 5 a.m. We'll have a shake or a smoothie around 10 or 11, eat a meal about 2 or 3, and that's it. That's really pretty much what we do on a daily basis. Um, and it fuels us because everything we take in, again, we it's only organic for the most part. When we did do our trip, you know, we had food that was given to us by family that wasn't necessarily organic, and we survived. But at the same time, we don't make a regular habit of it, and prioritize taking care of the body. That is a temple, so you got to exercise, you got to get it to move. You know, we're all toxified by this, you know, everything, the water, the air, the food. So you got to move it. You know, your lymphatic system, it doesn't have a pump. Your motion is its pump. So we're always thinking about detoxing, strengthening, conditioning, mind, body, breath. And, you know, yeah, it's kind of training for the apocalypse right now.
That's a scary thing for people. Their number one worry is not having enough food during sort of a grid down or some sort of contagion economically. That's an incredibly important part there, that you don't need to intake as much food as you think you do. You could probably cut that in half and still even have more energy because your body is not digesting as much. Like last night, we had hot pot, just a tremendously large meal, and just like, whoa, could barely walk away. Now, luckily, we started early around, say, 5:30, and you know, I worked until really late last night, so I was able to run through a lot of that before. You know, if we would have hit it at 9 or 10 o'clock like they do in Asia, and then you go home and you get in bed like 1, you don't really have a chance to burn a lot of that off. But you can definitely feel the difference if you don't eat in the morning and you let that roll all the way at least until noon, maybe a little bit after 2, 3 o'clock before you start to want to eat something, and let everything from the previous day kind of work its way through. You get more energy. You can start to feel your stomach growling again because the stomach's acids are coming back, but you don't really feel hungry. The only reason you feel hungry is because you've been programmed your whole life that you have to eat 3 times a day.
Mhm.
And it's really difficult to eat 3 times a day. Like 3 big meals is way too much. If anybody ever hadn't noticed, you know, you can have a little something in the morning, you know, a medium-sized lunch or a big dinner, or a big lunch and a medium-sized small dinner. But, you know, again, living in Asia, it's like huge breakfast, huge lunch, huge dinner, to the point where you're like, whoa, got to hold back on that. It is way too much food all the time. Like I've run the gamut of going in what you're trying to do fasting, and then, you know, coming up to incredibly too much food all the time. And I would have to say, you know, you hit the nail on the head, is preparing yourself for still having an incredibly energetic body, but using less food to achieve the same result. But see, that's not the programming in our world. The programming is a complete opposite. Not enough food is bad. You're going to turn into a Sally Struthers, you know, starving Sudanese child to feed for $1 a day kind of look if you eat once or twice. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
They tricked us in our mind.
Yeah, they totally
You were
have.
laughing, Cindy, because you remember that
No.
$1 a day Sally
Yeah.
Struthers thing.
It worked on me. It got me to sign up back in the day.
You know, we do the 1 meal a day thing, and we have been for a little while, and our energy went way up, and our practice got better, our minds got clearer,
It's
and
just the opposite. You
it's
do get
completely
more energy.
opposite. Mhm. I was also remembering at a time where they were telling people, if they're trying to lose weight, well, eat 6 little meals a day. And no, not for me. Some people have blood sugar issues.
What you have to understand, yeah, everybody's unique, but you know, again, that doesn't give the body time to detox. And that's the number one thing, that we're overly toxic. So you got to detox. When even organic food is still toxic, you need to have time without the food. And honestly, it makes all the difference in the world. It's like I don't get that like sleepiness after a meal. If you get that sleepiness, that heaviness, that fuzziness, brain fog, that you need to change something, because we really shouldn't be getting that.
And if you're not deliberately detoxing in this world, you're taking it on more and more every day. You go outside and you get a deep breath of heavy metals. We have to be detoxing every day.
We age prematurely because of our lifestyles. I think everybody, if of course there's genetic things that come through, challenges, but I think on the whole, if society was to develop a healthier way of living, people would go to an average lifespan of over 100 really quickly. I really think so.
Well, that would give you more knowledge to see the scams being pulled on society. They call it the great, or the turning, the fourth turning, for a reason, because the average lifespan of being, let's say, 80 years old, they can rerun the same play again after 80 years, because everybody pretty much who was alive forgot. There might be a few stragglers. There's a couple 100,000 people around on the whole planet that are over 80 that have remember, not just 80 itself, because when you were 0 or 1 years old, just after birth, you're not remembering the political climate and like the economy shenanigans and this. Usually you're like 10 or 12 where you can really get it. Oh, something happened to the family. I remember we didn't have food. We had to go hunt. Whatever it was. So you'd have to be over 90. Now that drops it, but still there's a bunch of people over 90 on the planet, but not enough of them to warn everybody, because when their warnings are fall on deaf ears, because that won't happen today. There's too many safeguards. Are you kidding me? Which, by the way, I was watching David Morgan, a personal friend of mine. He was talking to me about silver demand. There's a huge demand right now for these 1,000-ounce silver bars. And these are the ones that are truly driving the silver price, not the 1-ounce rounds you find online or buying this one. But the commercial bar market, as he termed it, the demand exceeds supply so tremendously that they're wondering next year where the supply for manufacturing comes in. And if that ceases, or there's a fallback on the production of the 1,000-ounce bars, then all of this tech, again, that we're using in terms of solar panels and everything else, the different batteries, the cars, electric car, everything that you can think of, is either going to halt or be slowed down in production just because of the lack of silver. So to wrest that out of the hands, they're going to have to drive the price up tremendously and try to pull all those millions of 1-ounce rounds out of your hands to get them back into the industrial hands. So again, how many times has this been played? Because I will go back into the 1850s and 1860s. We always hear about Civil War, but what occurred after the Civil War that not a lot of people talk about? Okay, there were the slavery ends, but what else ended also at the same time? The bimetallic system was done away with. So realize in the United States, we used gold and silver as money. And after that, we turned to a gold standard only. So if you were old enough to remember that, hey, wait, they took away a segment of our physical bullion monies away. So if you live to be 150 years old, you could see them replaying that same script again. So, having a shortened lifespan benefits many in power. So you won't see the same, smoke and mirrors shows repeated. It'll just be a new one because it'll be new for everybody who's alive because they haven't experienced it. Now, can you imagine if our average lifespan was 500 years old or 300 or 1,000, like the, reference with Methuselah and others, through times past? If we all live to be 1,000 years old, what is happening now on our planet could never, ever take place, ever.
That is true. One of the first things they'd have to do is not just lower the IQ, but lower the lifespan. Absolutely. It makes a lot of sense. So do you think that they will do like what they did before, confiscate the gold, make it illegal, and you could face arresting if you, have silver or gold? Do you anticipate that?
Not really. There's too much information on how everybody, 80% of the value, like every gold interview you ever watch, that's one of it'll come up inevitably, that the confiscation of gold in the 30s. Even though that happened, there was an enormous amount of people who kept their gold. It just kind of resurfaced later on. Again, you talked about this perfectly earlier. They're going to use the candy type of maneuvers this time versus the stick to hit you with to get it out. Would you let your silver go at $1,000 an ounce? For them, it's funny money. It really makes no difference if it's $10,000 an ounce for silver. It just doesn't matter. They can print more of it.
Right.
They can't print more of the actual physical thing. So to wrest it out of your hands gently, you will willingly give it at $500 to $1,000 an ounce. You could pay off your house. You could get a few goodies. You know, you got to keep up with the inflation as it hyperinflates away. But you know, $1,000 silver world would be a very scary one to be living in. But if you had the ability to take care of like half of a year's of expenses for getting rid of 1 or 2 silver rounds, you're going to do that just out of, again, the safety factor. But we have been brainwashed that money is valuable. It's worthless paper. The confidence keeps it valuable.
Right.
We got trillions of dollars in debt. So another trillion to buy all the silver back out of everybody, or $500 billion to get all the silver back out of American citizens is nothing. It's literally free money. Give us your silver. We're going to give you like fake paper, and then they're going to harvest it all back. They're going to do it gently this time with honey, because everybody will everybody will resist. And those first crews of people going to kick a door down to try to get a gold bar, or after the 30th of one of them not coming home to see their families again, the message is going to quickly go around. We can't do it this way. And I think they're already seeing that in advance. They already know so much about people through AI and harvesting of information from the videos and the podcasts and the conversations and your social media and your interactions and your comments, that they've already figured out confiscation is not going to work this time. Absolutely not going to work. There'll be so much resistance so fast it'll spin your head. So inflating the price away to let everybody who has the metals that had that opportunity to get in advance.
Maybe I'll try to swap it for XLM or XRP or something like that, you know, at some point in time.
Keep that on your cold wallet, because again, you know, that could very well be easily confiscatable. Because I watch Willy Woo, this crypto guy, and a few others as well, and they're always saying the trap right now is to get everybody in on these Bitcoin loans. We're like, give us your Bitcoin. You can take loan to value up to like 50%, 60%. Sounds like a good thing. And then next year when Bitcoin goes up, you can pay off the loan with the interest, and then you can roll it again and get a new loan. And then, you know, indefinitely live off of this. But he's like, this is the trap. It might work for 2, 3, 4 years, but eventually governments around the world are going to look for large pools of liquidity, and they're going to go in there and grab that. Do you think Coinbase is going to say no to American government when they come in and say, we're going to confiscate the Bitcoin? Of course not. Do you think, who's that? BitGo, do you think they're going to say no as a custodian holding, you know, 1 million Bitcoin, that the government comes in and says, you have to give the Bitcoin up? They're going to say, okay, here it is. The large pools of liquidity, wherever those are kept, those are going to be taken first. And all the people that have put their trust and faith in those are not, they might get paid out in fiat paper, but A, they lost the asset, and B, by that time they get paid out, it'll be hyperinflated away. So maybe it'll take 2 years for you, 3 years for you to get your capital cost back on that. So Bitcoin at 100,000, it takes you 3 years to get it back, but Bitcoin goes to 10 million by then. I mean, oh, great. Thanks for the 100,000. That's now only worth 3,000 because of inflation. But this is one of the dangers of those lending protocols. They get you in there, and if you don't hold those keys on a cold wallet, you don't own it. That is the easiest one to confiscate. If you go in levels of difficulty, confiscating property and kicking a family out in the cold winter out of their house so BlackRock can actually take that over and leave it vacant for years. Those people don't come home. You know, you got to realize the enforcers are going to be, their families are going to be very sad, and eventually people aren't going to want to go do that. So that is a very difficult eviction or confiscation, actually removing physical people out of a place that keeps them warm, fed, and out of danger. That's the very most dangerous way to get confiscation of gold and silver. Again, people are just going to say, no, I'm going to keep it. There's a black market that'll evolve somewhere. I know farmers that'll trade gold for cows, silver for hogs. I will use and it'll be just like a community thing, or all that silver will stay in like a 15-mile radius. They're not going to get rid of it. And it'll just float around the community. And it's still worth something, right? It's always been worth something, thousands of years, not going to change tomorrow. Easiest one for them to confiscate absolutely is going to be stocks. Anything that has a brokerage account with it and middleman, you don't own that. You're like an unsecured creditor. and then crypto. Those are the lowest hanging fruits, ripping everybody's equities, bonds, and crypto away from them, because that's done at the institutional level, where none of those intermediaries that are the brokers for you are going to say no. They're all just going to go, yes, sir. And that'll be the easiest. So then levels, if they can't fix the contagion with that or reset something with that amount, your bank accounts, they're going to rip all that, the great taking. The next level up is going to get more and more and more difficult, to the point where it is going to get pushed back and they'll have to stop. So they're going to lowest hanging fruit first.
I totally agree. Again, if you think you own silver and gold, but you own paper, that could be nothing. You have to have it tangibly. That gets you also into, well, where do you, in a depression type environment, when we know dollar devaluation is underway, and I do think the ultimate goal is eliminating the dollar. They want it gone. They want also us to be less powerful in the world situation. They like the Chinese model, the CCP model. It makes it easier to control people in that model. So yeah, it's again, where do you invest? I think self-sufficiency, exactly what you've done. Invest in apple trees, pear trees, invest in crops, invest in the ability to sustain yourself as best as you can. Keep in mind too, you're in Tennessee, so you don't have income tax. I don't know what the property taxes are, but again, in some areas, if you have a real bad depression hit, people might be faced with not being able to pay their property taxes, and then the counties, the cities, the towns, they all gobble that up. They just confiscate it. You're going to have so many properties. What are they going to do? Are they going to be buying Boston Dynamics dogs and Elon Musk's Optimus to guard these properties?
Well, I agree on that tremendously, but another overlooked factor here is the insurance that's required on most people who have mortgages. Like, my insurance went up 30% this year, and I talked to my agent, and she was saying that, well, you can plan on this 30% increase for at least the next 2 to 3 years. Costs and labor have become so expensive, even though you have had no claims and you're living in an older log home. Your insurance premiums are going to continue to rise because it costs more to pay out other person's claims. And the same with my automobile, totally paid off, no tickets, no accidents, never been towed or anything. And my auto insurance went up 12% this year. And it was the same thing. She's like, well, it might not go up next year as much, but they're going to continually raise the premium prices to try to cover the offset on these overvalued homes that were $100,000. Now they're $600,000, to try to rebuild something like that. Any of you who haven't had any claims, luckily, you're just paying for everybody else. So the property tax is one thing to look at, but can you afford a 30 to 50, maybe hell, man, maybe 1 year it jumps up to a doubling of your rates? Like in Florida, I saw that one couple, they did some remodeling on their home, and then it went from something like $3,000 a year, which is outrageous anyway, to something like $20,000 a year for insurance. And I was like, well, you would have to sell your home at that point. And it was a totally paid for $1 million plus home. And they're like, wait a minute, 20 grand a year? Like, that was more than our payments were for the house when we originally bought this thing.
One of our family members, he's in Florida, and he doesn't keep insurance because his house is paid off.
House is paid off, but most people are not.
Yeah.
See, that's the trap.
Yeah, but if he's like, the way I figure it is, all that money that's going out into a black hole, I just put money off to the side to cover whatever it is, and so he's not playing the insurance game. This truck that we have, I've never had a vehicle this long, 6 going on 7 years. Never had a vehicle that long, but I don't plan on ever buying a brand new one again, because it's not so much even though I can't see spending 50, 60,000 on a vehicle. That's just me. 100,000 some people spend on vehicles. It's the insurance. Yeah, that would be through. It just makes it unfeasible. So yeah, this is where I think we need to be as self-sufficient as possible, and that includes we're all trained to overbuy and think, well, I could get this on credit, I could get that in credit. It'd only be 200 a month, 500 a month, whatever it is. We can handle that. But then when they pull the rug, you can't, and then you lose everything. And then, it's the house collecting, and the house is BlackRock and Vanguard, and that whole machine, which is just growing bigger. So, that's kind of why we ended up in the area that we did, because when I'm looking at it, really the most affordable places to live in the U.S. are West Virginia, Kentucky, Mississippi, Arkansas, Alabama, Louisiana. These areas are way more affordable. I was born in Connecticut, and I had 1,000 square foot house that I ended up paying like 7,000 a year for taxes on. And then I moved to,
What?
yeah, I paid that. It was so unaffordable for 1,000 square foot simple little Cape Cod.
7,000.
Yeah, I moved to South Carolina in 2007, got a 2,000 square foot house that was only a couple years old, and my taxes were like 600 in South Carolina. So, again, there's a lot of choices to be made.
And again, if you have enough property, if you can get it zoned in green belt or green zone, there's a lot of different names for what the protected area where you say, I'm not going to log the forest. Basically, I'm going to leave it as a native habitat. Generally, you get zero or almost no tax if you're going to register your property as a green belt. Now, please understand, every state has different, land requirements for that. Some some states are as low as 2-3 acres. Some areas, 5-10 acres. Here in Tennessee, it's 15. So if you anything up to 15, if you got 15.1, you can register as a green zone, and then you can knock your house out in a half-acre parcel by itself, and then the predominant amount of your land is taxed at green zone, which is, really nothing.
That deliberate choice, I choose human.
Yeah.
I think we're going to have to, and when people are tired of it, at that point they will. But sometimes it takes a lot to get people tired of something. They just keep adjusting and going on, the frog in boiling water, and the controllers know this. So until you break out of that mindset that we're not going to have a savior, you're the savior, you're the one who has to make the changes, it makes it so much harder. But that's what we're faced with. Well, what are they going to do with us is my question. We're going to have to go somewhere. They're making us irrelevant in a way.
They're trying. But yet we're the ones that have the energy. We're the ones that have the source spark within us. So they need us. They obviously need us, because why not just eliminate all humans? They don't want to do that. They just want to control the humans.
That's why you need to support channels just like this, Evolutionary Energy Arts. Support any way you can. And the Adapt 2030 channel, it's almost like our pitch before was like, support the program. Now it's just support human creators.
Yeah.
Really a change from buying the merch or whatever, go and sign up for the newsletter or whatever you got to do. Support the human creators, please.
Yep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Since you said that last point, and I wanted to maybe go a little woo and deep on the way out here. If you follow the stories, the Anunnaki created the human species about 400,000 years ago as a slave race for its tasks that those themselves did not want to handle, i.e. gold mining. So it does kind of go in with your point there. They would not wipe every human out except for the Great Flood. It came to a point, if you do trace the history back, the first ones created were way too intelligent. They had way too much of whatever the Anunnaki strands were that were equivalent or near. And they're like, well, that doesn't work. They're too smart. So we've come down to a couple times where wipeouts have come. And you got to wonder between the ice ages as well, when everything constricts down to just, 20 north to 20 south is open and everything else is iced up, or extremely cold and weird weather flows and just crops don't grow. Like that would be another constriction point. That's happened 3 times. But now we're into this 4th iteration here, and you're right. They wouldn't wipe all humans out. And I'm just, wanted to go with that last thought if you could. And thank you everybody for joining again. Support human created content, Evolutionary Energy Arts.
How often do the resets? I think the resets are always ongoing. And, you know, one of the things that I found really, really curious is the anomalies, like around 1700, the Great Cascadian Quake, the maps, like you know, I love that you've been deep diving into the maps and all that. That's like some of my favorite stuff to deep dive into. How much, how much change can they really create on the planet? You know, again, Piri Reis, you know, that Antarctica map that shows it without ice, you know, taken from an older, that whole thing. But, you know, when you look to the maps of the North Pole showing four land masses joined as one, and these maps, again, they're going back 400 to 500 years ago, and then they just kind of erase it. But if you look on Google Earth, you could see there's like a energetic blob over that area. It's a little bit blurry. California was an island in almost all the maps pre 1700. So, are we talking the technology that can literally move tectonic plates and literally sink whole continents? Do they have that type of technology? Is that what they mean by Great Reset, or is that Mother Earth trying to rectify some of the, you know, wrongs that the system's doing to her and to us? Because we're all cells in Earth itself, and you know, just like, you know, we have 10 times the amount of bacteria in our bodies than we do cells, and you're made up of all these cells, which are individual units of consciousness. You know, what type of technology do they really have? What is Mother Earth trying to wash away the system, and what is actually possible with the technology that these beings have?
Since you brought it up, I wanted to show you this anomaly. If you go to Null School, or it's earth.nullschool.net, it's just a wind map that is one of the best on the planet. And I've heard many people, well, it's just an anomaly. Well, you think after this thing has been around for like 8 years, they would have corrected the anomaly had it been an anomaly. So what we're doing is we're looking over the North Pole here. So you can see Greenland there. I see the Kamchatka Peninsula off to like maybe 9 o'clock position. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to zoom in on the North Pole here, exactly at the straight North Pole. Okay, so here we are. You can see the crosshairs there. It's coming in north. But what do you see that's causing a distortion right there?
Mm-hmm.
This is something that's been talked about time immemorial on these wind maps, and that's why Windy doesn't take you up to the North Pole. The only one that does this is Null School. And, you know, as it is, they always leave the truth in at least one place if you want to find it. So if you're coming back to that, whether it was an entrance in or an entrance out, that electrical disturbance, some people say it's a mountain they're seeing on some of these old maps you're talking about, but the wind flow is absolutely disturbed over direct north here. And that vortice has been there, and it moves around too. If it was an anomaly, it would pretty much just stay in the same spot, clicking over and over again. But this anomaly moves around, believe it or not. And sometimes it's right over the north, and as you see, it's you know, on that line going what, that 9 o'clock position. But it'll move 6 o'clock position, and it does move around depending on where the global winds are. And right now, there's a huge stratospheric warming event happening. So you just have to wonder, you know, what is what's up there that's being shown to us.
When you look at those ancient maps, they actually have it labeled as a magnetic black rock. That's up there, a magnetic black rock, and boy, does that open up a lot of wormholes.
Something's disturbing the wind pattern. Now, could it be magnetic? Absolutely. Could be that black rock is actually above flat ocean there, and it wouldn't have to be that tall. It doesn't have to be, you know, the size of the Himalaya. If you're completely flat out there on ice and then landmass, which is also shown in the maps, that disturbance pattern, the mountains wouldn't have to be but a, you know, couple thousand feet tall, or even a little bit under, to show that wind vortex coming around there, because something's disturbing the flow.
Yeah, Cindy's picking up that it's magnetic, and
Are you getting a magnetic on that?
Magnetic. I keep feeling in my energy field, to the best of my understanding, it is a technology, and it's magnetic, and it can change and it can shift with the ether. So
yeah, it makes me think. Again, we have the Kaaba, you know, at Mecca. We have that black rock. Trump Towers has a black rock on it. Black rock is black rock. It's named that for a reason. New Jerusalem is given as a golden cube coming out of the sky, which is so big it would stretch from Rome all the way to Jerusalem. By the depictions of how it's described. So, yeah, what if it's some sort of technology? Again, anti-gravity, magnetic.
Well, it's also very, very ancient. So it's something that's been here for who knows how long, but it definitely deliberately placed, and someone knows a lot about it. And the energy is also blocked on it. There's a blockage of energy that I can't see past. Those are the only things I can tell you, that it's ancient, it's magnetic, it's a technology, and someone's know a lot about it. The other thing that it does, David, when I keep sinking into that, and maybe I'll do more, is it's does something to the human heart chakra. I would imagine it's going to affect animals too, but that's our biggest chakra. And I got this burning inside of it. So it feels like there can be adjustments done to humans too. It's kind of weird. The energy is very, well, it's very dark, but that doesn't mean that it's horrible, but it feels like it can control a lot more than we can perceive.
So, there is this energetic warfare that's well beyond what most people could comprehend, and it would sound too woo-woo, but there's evidence all around us of just how big it is.
Sorry. Kids are awake.
Nothing's too woo in this world. Yeah, you got a couple protectors there. Bye for now.